I'm going to give you some surprising statistics about all of the GOAT format deck lists from the recent World Championship. And most importantly, I'm going to show you a better way to analyze top cut deck lists from any tournament that'll give you an edge against other players. Welcome to GOAT Duels. I'm ACP, and if you want to know what did well at the recent GOAT format World Championship and why, you're in the right place. Now, I'm going to talk about all of this mostly through the context of conversion rates. The idea here is that we want to see which deck lists were most likely to give their users good results. So if 20 people used a particular deck and 3 of them made top cut, that's a conversion rate of only 15%. But if 5 people used another deck and 2 of them made top cut, that's a conversion rate of 40%, which is better. And this gives us a more fair way to look at what the best decks actually were as opposed to just the most popular. So let's get started with the lowest conversion rates first. Rescue Cat had 1 player that used it, and that player did not make the top cut, so that's a conversion rate of 0%. Of course, one very small sample size. I don't think that there's a lot that we can really conclude about Rescue Cat based on this. I personally think Rescue Cat OTK, still a great deck. Any deck that threatens to kill your opponent on the first turn, I think, is a good deck in GOAT format. And I also think Rescue Cat is very underexplored. There's a lot of different ways to play it. So if you're a player who likes Rescue Cat, I wouldn't be too disappointed with this result. I think you just need to get back on the grind, try out some different builds, and maybe next time you will be the one to make top cut with this deck. Moving on, we have Monarchs with 2 entrants and 0 in top cut for a conversion rate of 0%. This really surprised me for a couple of reasons. One, I think Monarchs is a great deck. I think it's great at just being anti-meta. You can play things like Zalborg, Gravekeeper Spy, Royal Decree. All of these cards are really good cards. And Monarchs has done really well recently, actually. Before this tournament, I think was in top cut for like 5 tournaments in a row or something. So I was surprised that we had 0 of these decks in top cut, and also surprised that only 2 people played this. I know that Alpha Ya 2, arguably the best Monarch player, actually decided to play a different deck entirely. I think maybe if he'd played Monarchs, we would have seen him in the top cut. So again, if you're a Monarch player, I wouldn't be too disappointed with these results. I've already done a video on why Monarchs are so good. I might even do another video on Monarchs, because I think people still don't get how good this deck really is. Then we have Reasoning Gate, a deck that had 5 entrants, so was fairly popular, but 0 of them made top cut for a conversion rate of 0%. One of those players was using the Stein build. I do think the Stein build is better, but to me, Reasoning Gate is Reasoning Gate, regardless of whether you're playing Stein or not, so I just chose to group them together for the purpose of these statistics. Now, one thing that you do have to be aware of as a Reasoning Gate player is if you're, of course, playing Dimension Fusion, Kaiku is a very strong card against you, and I think a lot of people did show up with their Kaikus for this event. Another thing to be aware of is that Trap Dust Shoot and Phoenix Windblast can be pretty good against you, which we know are also very popular cards in GOAT format. So me personally, I think if you have the right build, Reasoning Gate is a very strong deck, very powerful. However, it is also a very difficult deck to play. In my opinion, arguably the most difficult in GOAT format. So if you're an experienced player with a great deck list, I think you can do well with Reasoning Gate. Otherwise, maybe try something else, because this deck didn't do particularly well this time. Now for the first deck that did not have a conversion rate of 0%, we have Panda Burn. 7 people chose to play this deck. 1 of them made top cut. That's a conversion rate of 14%. Not really too great, if we're being honest. This tournament was a little interesting. I think we had some weird metagaming going on here, because the Swiss rounds did use time, which meant that you could try to run out the clock and have higher life to win that way. I don't really think that happened too much, though. And I think because of those time rules, maybe people showed up with more life gain cards in their side deck, like Mystic Walk and Hysteric Fairy, which made Panda Burn worse. So really, I just think at this point that Panda Burn is in a very different place than it was a year ago or so, just in the sense that people are prepared for this deck now. This isn't the kind of deck that is really going to catch anyone off guard. Worlds, of course, has all of the best players showing up. They're all prepared for Panda Burn. So when you think about it, it's not too surprising that this deck did underperform. Now we got to talk about 2 decks with the same conversion rate, 1 out of 6 or 17%. Those were the two most popular decks of the tournament, and surprising no one, those were, as some people call it, Chaos Turbo. I call it Standard Chaos. 36 players played that deck, 6 made Top Cut, and then, of course, Warriors. 12 players used Warriors, 2 made Top Cut. And both of these stats, to me, are pretty underwhelming. I think you're going to be a little disappointed if you're a fan of these decks. I think what we saw with Chaos in particular is a lot of players defaulted to this deck as a safe choice, right? Almost half of the players that entered this tournament were using this deck. And yet it didn't really do that well. I mean, it gave their pilots a 1 out of 6 chance of topping. Not really that great, if we're being quite honest here. And I think moving forward, what players have to realize is that Chaos is not some sort of like broken deck, right? I think it's sort of a good pub stomper deck. It's also a great deck for newer players because most of the plays are pretty straightforward. It doesn't have a lot of super hard decision points. But if you're looking for a deck that is going to succeed at the highest levels of GOAT format tournament play, I think there are better options. Everyone came prepared for Chaos, right? Whether you're playing Warriors or Earth Aggro or GOAT Control or Chaos Return, everyone had Chaos on the forefront of their minds. People showed up with their Kaikus. They showed up with their Dust Shoots. They showed up with their Mystic Swordsman level 2s and Golem Sentries and all of that spicy tech for Chaos. So if you happen to be an amazing Chaos player, sure, go ahead and play Chaos. If you're playing with maybe mid to lower level players, yeah, go ahead and play Chaos. But if you are playing sort of at the top levels of GOAT format play, I think there are other options. I think players need to broaden their horizons and try other decks. Then as far as Warriors go, I've played Warriors a little bit myself, and my opinion right now is this deck, it's called Warrior Toolbox for a reason, guys. I think Warriors has been a little stale over the past few months. I think some of the Warrior players have gotten lazy, and I think they need to explore new tech options. I really do. So in one of my previous videos, I talked about Gearfried the Iron Knight, Blast with Chain, as a potential combo that you can add to Warriors that'll help you with some of your bad matchups. I'm not saying you need to play those cards. If you don't like those cards, if you think they suck, don't play them. But I think they need something new. I think they need to add something to spice up their deck and help them overcome a lot of these decks that are gunning for them. GOAT Control does really well against Warriors. Earth Aggro does really well against Warriors. So does Monarchs, so on. So whether it's the main deck or the side deck, I think players need to understand that Warriors is not nearly as strong as it used to be, and we need to innovate more if we want to see Warriors taking lots of top cut slots again. Now, let's talk about some decks that had a 50% conversion rate. That's not 15, that's 50. So Earth Aggro, very interesting deck. 2 entrants, 1 made top cut. Of course, again, very small sample size. Not necessarily a lot that we can conclude from this, but I have noticed that this isn't the first time that Earth Aggro has done well. It isn't. It's done pretty well in some recent tournaments, and to me, this indicates that there's something to this, right? This isn't a fluke. Earth Aggro is a deck that has potential. Gigantis, really great card, right? 1900 special summon, Heavy Storm, Berserk Girl, and Goblin Attack Force definitely have the potential to be good cards. Those, of course, are, as I said, very good against Warriors. So I think Earth Aggro can be a good meta call if you're expecting some other aggro decks. So me personally, I haven't really looked at Earth Aggro too much. Now I kind of want to. I think this deck is very underexplored. I think people aren't really talking about this deck, but I'm going to make an effort to change that. So if you want me to test out Earth Aggro for you guys, make a video on that, let me know, because I do think this is an up-and-coming deck here. Next, we have Chaos Control. Only 4 players used this deck, but 2 made top cut. Now, if we were looking at a month or 2 ago, Chaos Control likely would have been the 3rd or 4th most popular deck. So when we're talking about Chaos Control here, we just mean a control deck that has Chaos Sorcerer, Thunder Dragon, and Metamorphosis. And I recently made a video talking about some of the downsides of this deck, making the case that maybe this deck is a little overrated. And I think players have caught on to that, and because of that, I think what happened here is that some of the maybe not so great Chaos Control players decided to play something else, decided to play something, maybe a little more off meta. Maybe some of them just switched over to a more standard Chaos build. Maybe some of them switched to Goat Control. But I think what we saw is that this deck is a lot less popular than it used to be. But the other side of the coin there is that the players who did decide to play this deck did pretty well. I know we had Insidious. He did very well in this tournament. I know he's been playing that deck like forever, like 2 years plus. So my opinion on Chaos Control hasn't really changed. I still think the deck is maybe a little overrated, but if you're a great player who has a lot of experience with this deck, it might be the best choice for you. And clearly it still has the potential to do well, take some top cut slots. And now we have Goat Control, a deck that had 6 entrants with 3 in the top cut. Goat Control is making a bit of a comeback. One of these players did throw a bit of a warrior engine into their deck. That's not the first time that's ever happened. In fact, I've even tried that before. I wouldn't really consider a Goat Control deck with a reinforcement of the Army Toolbox engine in it to be like a whole new deck. To me, Goat Control is still Goat Control if you got Goats meta Tsukiyomi. So with that being said, we had 3 out of 6 in top cut. Geisty with Goat Control got second place. Geisty, probably one of the best GOAT format players of all time. So to me, it didn't surprise me that he did so well. I think what happened in this tournament is some of the better players realized that GOAT Control is maybe being slept on a little. And if they put their heads together, came up with some good deck lists, that they could succeed. And they did, in fact, succeed. And I think what we're going to see is that the meta is going to sort of continue in that RPS fashion that I talked about in my earlier video, where we're going to see Goat Control mainly being a counter to Warriors, which of course is still popular. Goat Control pretty good against the other aggro decks too, like Earth Aggro, which I think could also get more popular. So my advice to you would be Goat Control. It's a good deck, but it's pretty hard to play. So if you want to use this deck, go ahead, give it a shot. Just realize that you probably need a good amount of experience with it if you want to be the one in top cut next time. And last, we have Chaos Return, a deck that had 1 entrant. That 1 entrant did in fact make top cut, and not only did he make top cut, he even won the whole tournament. So that is a conversion rate of 100% in the truest sense. Chaos Return practically didn't lose a match. So I still think this deck is pretty good, right? It probably doesn't surprise you. I was one of the main people who kind of helped put this deck on the map. Of course, Dingo Sig was the guy who won with it, not me, so he's doing all the heavy lifting, needless to say. But as it turns out, hoping that your Dakochis and Spies get Noblemen and returning them all for game, still a pretty good strategy. And as it turns out, Shining Angel is still a pretty good card. Who would have thought that we would have seen Shining Angel in the winning deck list of this tournament? But yeah, Chaos Return, like some of these other decks, was just kind of built to beat the meta, right? Chaos Return, it really is the ultimate Chaos deck that beats other Chaos decks, right? You sort of just throw Chaos monsters at each other, and then you just return all your guys and attack for game. Pretty good, as it turns out. And Chaos, it does do pretty well against Warriors too, right? You're playing like a bunch of Spies and Shining Angels. Those are all pretty good against the aggro decks. And of course, this deck list was playing 2 copies of Zaborg. I remember when Dingo Sig first started winning with this deck, I told him, dude, you gotta play these Zaborgs. Zaborg is the nuts. And as it turns out, it is the nuts. That's part of the reason that I was a little surprised that Monarchs didn't do better, is just because Zaborg is such a good tribute monster right now. Very good against really just the other Chaos decks in particular. And of course, just being a light monster with 2400 attack, great card to return as well. So congrats to Dingo Sig on the win. Congrats to Geisty on second place. And let me know what you guys think about the meta, right? Do you think that Chaos Return is one of the best decks, or maybe just got lucky? Do you think we're going to see more Goat Control going forward? Do you think that we're going to see Reasoning Gate drop out of the meta? Do you think that Warriors and Standard Chaos, do you think they underperformed? Do you think that maybe they just got unlucky and they're going to do better in the future? What do you think about Earth Aggro? What's the deal with that? Is that deck going to be the new meta? Let me know, guys. And if you liked watching this video, make sure to watch this video next, where I talk about how Chaos Control fits into the meta and why I think it's a little overrated right now.